Disclaimer: for anyone struggling with depression, this podcast covers the topic of death, what it is, and what it entails for humanity, along with instances of the concept of death being explored in anime in an attempt to further understand what we know as death. The pursuit of anime is an aim to explore philosophical topics through the medium of anime, to create discussion and to enlighten ourselves. We are by no means professionals, and the content of this podcast is pure discussion meant to stimulate and exercise our minds, and hopefully yours too. Um, I am Raven, joined by Teddy. We are your hosts. And before we get into any points or dive into any of these philosophical or anime related examples regarding death and what it is, I just kind of want to get like our unfiltered, unaffected, unadulterated kind of thoughts on what death is. So, Teddy, for you, I guess, like, is there a first experience you had um, when you realized that we all die? I don't know if there was something like that for you, but I remember when I was a kid, I just had this moment when I just started crying one night as a kid because I just realized that, like, man, one day I'm gonna die, and I just kept crying and crying. And my parents didn't understand why, and it was just like this existential crisis I was going through
Yeah,
when I was
no,
a kid.
I feel you on that 100%. I could tell you, I think it was around 10 when I was 10 going on 11. I I it just dawned on me. And it was so random too, because and mind you, after that I had the hardest time sleeping because in my mind, sleeping was the closest similarity you could have in real life to death, right? Because at that point, your eyes are closed, you're not seeing anything, you're not feeling anything, you're just kind of gone. And the problem with that is that when you're alive, it's a very disturbing thought because it's not something you can relate to. Because when you're alive, you feel, right? You have your five senses and you interact with people around you. So for me, I equated death to nothingness. And eternal nothingness was a cause of anxiety for me. So yeah, around 10 going on 11 is when dude, I was going through a midlife crisis at 10, bro. I was stressing out. Like it was not fun for me. And it got to a point where I just had like I'd never found a way to properly deal with it. So I just repress it and ignore it to this day. To this
To
day.
this day,
To this
until
day.
today,
Yeah.
where we have to talk about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Shout,
Yeah.
shout, shout
Oh
out
my
to
god.
Deontay Wilder because
Hey.
yeah, for real. It's one of the diseases where I can tell you to this day, I've never found a way to deal with that anxiety that comes with the thought of just death or the state of death, right?
Okay.
And yeah,
Well, let me ask you this then. So I want you to picture this, and the audience too listening.
don't do this to me.
So imagine this: there's a place where this mysterious bar exists, right? It doesn't have a name, and you are at this bar. And when you get to this bar, you are, let's say you're forced to play whatever, a game of cards, bowling, darts, whatever, right?
Mhm.
And you're basically forced, you have to play this game against some random other person that's also at this bar. And you're the only two people at this bar, apart from there being a bartender. Um,
I know what you're talking about.
so
I've
yeah,
watched.
yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you win, you get to leave this bar. If you lose, however, you die. But there's a catch, right? That's just how the situation appears. But the reality is
You're
actually this:
already dead.
you're already dead. And
Yeah.
what you're playing for is this: if you win, you get to be reincarnated. If you lose, you are discarded forever into the void, into the very thing you feared so much as a kid.
Yeah, I
You are
know.
discarded into.
You get
So
sent to the shadow realm.
if you were in this situation, would you play the game?
At that point, I've realized that I have no control over the situation. So what choice do I have? I'm in there. I might as well play because it's not like I can leave. Where is
Yeah,
there for me to go? You see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
at least with playing the game, that gives me something that I have. Well, I'm under the illusion that I have somewhat of a control over that. But like you said, like everything is already being preordained and set up. So all I can do is just be a cog in the machine. I don't have anything. I don't have any other options realistically. So
yeah. And that,
what was the name of the anime? I forget.
yeah, the anime we're talking about is actually Death Parade. Um,
Ah, thank you. I was like,
Such
it
a
was
good
killing me.
anime, so
It's really
short.
good.
Yeah, the opening is fire. It's like iconic.
Yeah, it hit me in the feels though, watching that
Yeah,
because I like it tackles the topic of death and what happens when you die and after you die so well. And it just it's interesting because it was very uncomfortable for me to watch based on what I've told you earlier about my experience with the realization of what death means or entails. And
yeah,
so watching that, it kind of brought back to the surface all these suppressed emotions that I buried deep underneath layers and layers of distractions. Like I don't want to think about this, but it made me face it. And it was a sobering experience. I enjoyed it though. It was really good.
yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like
Same.
was it completed? I'm not sure. I don't remember. I
Yeah,
feel like there was more to it.
the story, for the most part, completed. I think there was an OVA, but for the most part, the story was actually wrapped up towards the end.
Okay.
I remember we followed like a black-haired girl that was with this like white-haired bartender, and yeah, I forgot the plot, but I do remember very clearly like that that whole dynamic of people just showing up at this bar, and it brings this question, right? Because people get to the bar, and when they realize they're dead, they start getting desperate to win that game
They
because
go through the stages of grief almost.
yeah, because we want to basically escape death. We don't want to just like cease to exist. We want to cling back onto life. We want to come back into life, right? And there's actually this idea in Greek philosophy. There's this Greek philosopher, Epicurus, who he had this to say, and I want to know what you think about this, Teddy, and the people who are listening, right? So, this person argued that death cannot harm those who die, since people go out of existence when they die, and you cannot be harmed when you do not exist.
This is true. It's the grief that comes with it that affects the people that are close to you.
Yeah,
That's usually, what it is. Because once
yeah,
you're dead, I mean, that's it. It's done. It's over. Like, well, what is it? You remember in One Piece when we went to Skypiea?
yeah,
Do you remember all the priests?
yeah,
Yeah, and Nell's servants. One of them was called Ohm, and he had that weird, like, whippy sword, like a sword that was like a whip. And he would walk around talking about everybody is in so much pain. They live in a constant state of pain from existence, and the only salvation is death. Death will bring you solace. That's what he used to say, and it's clearly misguided, but at the same time, there's some truth to it. Think about all the struggles that we go through, especially in modern society, just to exist. Right, the fact that you have to work and provide for yourself and sometimes for your loved ones, people around you, if you're responsible for other people. And all that just to exist.
yeah,
At some point, you can think about it like, hey, listen, if you don't have to deal with any of that anymore, I understand why people say, oh yeah, I'll bring, salvation, you can find it through death, right? But with Death Parade, right? That's the name of the anime, right?
yeah.
Do you remember there's one thing that all these people that went to that place, there's one thing that they all had in common.
What?
which is the reason why they're bargaining so much, is the fact that they all had untimely deaths. Most of them, they were doing something, and then out of nowhere they just died and instantly got sent to that place. And you remember when they wake up, usually they don't have memories of the most recent event that happened around them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it would be, I feel interesting and also different if instead of people who met untimely deaths, it were, say, the elderly or people with terminal illnesses, where they wake up in that, but having known that their time was up, right? I feel like a lot of people who have terminal illnesses, they can feel it when the life is leaving them because they've been in that state for so long, and they're like, oh, sweet release is near, right? So I think it would be a different outlook if we saw those type of people end up in that place versus people that all met untimely deaths, essentially.
Yeah, that's true. Big and I mean, with just everything you're saying with the quote from the philosopher and Death Parade and all these things, right? I've noticed kind of a trend that we all, at least for the examples we've brought up so far, we all kind of see death as the same thing. That to die is to basically
Cease
cease
to
to
exist.
exist
That's
in some
right.
yeah, right there.
Yeah.
So, and actually brings me to kind of like to reflect on another great One Piece moment. Um, when Chopper's master, Dr. Hiluluk, he says this like really awesome famous quote that I mean anybody who loves One Piece knows this. He says, "When do you think people die? When they are shot through the head, through the I think head or heart, something like that, by a pistol? No. When they are ravaged by an incurable disease? No. When they drink a soup made from a poisonous mushroom? No. It's when they are forgotten." So basically, what the doctor is saying is that as long as you aren't forgotten, you will not die. You will not cease to exist because you still exist in some capacity. You exist to the people that carry on your will, to the people
Your
that remember
memories
you.
left behind. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I don't know how do you feel about that? Do you subscribe to that? Do you feel that like when you die you will find some peace in knowing that maybe your family, grandchildren, your friends who are still alive will remember you?
No, no. It's a hopeful message, right?
Yeah.
It's a hopeful way of looking at it, thinking, hey, you know what? They're dead, but they're not really dead because they're still living on in our heart. But I feel like doing that is dismissing the very real pain, anguish, and grief that people feel when somebody dies.
Yeah.
Those are really real. They never go away. I mean, with time, you learn to, it's like any stimulus in life or any stimuli in life. Over time, you just start feeling it because it's there so much, and you can only hurt so much before it doesn't hurt anymore,
Yeah.
or at least not as much. But that's the thing is, you you can, even in that example with Dr. Hiluk and Chopper, right? I'm pretty sure that yes, he remembers fondly in Dr. Hiluk and the experiences they had together. But the pain of his loss is still there. And mind you, it's even worse for him because he knows that he's partly responsible because of the mushroom soup he made for him.
Mhm.
So all of that doesn't go away just because you have the memories of that person left behind. You see
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So it's a beautiful message. It's a very hopeful message. And even um in 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 real life, we have the same notion with people like, say, Michael Jackson, where many argue that he's achieved eternal life essentially because his music is timeless. People play to this day. New generations who may not know about some of the artists that we grew up with know about Michael. And you can say that that in itself is a feat, is an accomplishment. But let me tell you, the pain that people experience from his death is still there. I go on in comment sections of YouTube videos that are related to Michael one way or another, whether it be a uh, music video, or like a documentary, or interview, anything like that, right? You go
Yeah.
in section, and people are still to this day grieving over his loss, right? So yeah, sure, he's not forgotten, but he's very much dead. And the consequences of that are still very real and still very much felt by a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, just before we like go in even deeper, like we I think we've already kind of established how we both feel about death. We both kind of feel like that death is just kind of a void. Once you die, it's just like boom. Like you're in the black. It's almost like as if you ever had a good sleep where you don't even
Oh
dream,
my
it just
God.
feels like time.
Yes.
It feels like a second passes. It was nothing but that second was kind of like eternity, and you just open your eyes and you're back in the world. Like it's kind of insane if you've ever experienced that.
Dude, between the hours of 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., it happens to me almost consistently where if I didn't sleep during the night, I blink at 6 a.m. and I open my eyes again, it's 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so scary because you're like, I know I wasn't out for that long, but that's just it. The notion of time just is completely distorted at that point in time.
Yeah, it almost like it literally almost like ceases to exist for you because at that point like you're not aware of anything. It's just there you're it's almost as if you're not even there.
Yeah.
So I feel like that could be kind of what death is like, but do you think that reincarnation has any likeliness of being true because there's other like ways people view death, right? There's ways like well, honestly the two I'm most aware of are um you either go to heaven or hell after you die. Oh, well, three actually. You either go to heaven or hell when you die, you cease to exist and end up in a void, an oblivion of some sort, or you are reincarnated. Do you think that like heaven and hell and reincarnation have some validity or likeliness to them? Or do you just like kind of dismiss them? You just think that that's highly unlikely to happen when you die?
Well, so I grew up in a Christian household, so I subscribe to the belief that there is a heaven and hell.
Yeah.
The thing about the reincarnation, why I don't like it is because I feel like, see, we're about to get into those kinds of conversations that I try to avoid because it makes me think about this stuff and I don't want to, but here you go. So sometimes I think about it and I'm like, if we did get reincarnated, it would make sense because I look at human beings as having occupying slots. And so God has created a set number of human beings that he wants to exist at any point in time, or at least he plans for it like that, right? They're, of course, they're
Yeah.
not created instantly because you gotta, do the nasty, mattress push-ups and make babies, but he he has a plan of how many souls he wants existent at any point in time. And so anytime one soul like completes its time on earth, he reuses it somewhere else because I've heard instances of people say, oh, this kid has a very defining either physical feature or character trait that's reminiscent of their great grandfather or the great grandmother or something like that, where it's so one to one that people just come to the conclusion that it just has to be reincarnation. Because how else would that happen, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, genetics and hereditary traits are a thing, but I guess, we're just going to choose to ignore that. It, having said that, I thought about it. I was like, but if that's the case, we have to think the Earth's population has increased over the years, right? Over decades, over generations. So that can't possibly be true unless we're splitting souls between different bodies. And at that point, it just starts to get into technicalities where I just don't think that the reincarnation argument holds as much, because then it's like, so those, what happens to those bodies that, they don't have a soul set aside for them because there's more bodies now, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I don't believe reincarnation is a thing. I think it can exist within a very specific uh environment, but if we're talking world scale, I don't think that's a realistic belief to have. Just on a very practical, um on very practical ground. Now, with the heaven and hell, I believe that it exists just because, my upbringing. And also, this is something very silly, right? I don't say this very often because I personally think it's an embarrassing story. I want to say 13, either 12, 13, or 14, around that age. And I was in this group project with my friends, and out of all of us, I was the one with a printer at home. So I was in charge of printing out the documents we needed for the project. Mind you, I forgot that I needed to do it. So when they came to my house and we had to get together, I was like, oh, my fault. I forgot to print out those printouts. Let me go ahead and do that right now. And I went, and we were out of ink. Like, there was damn near no ink left. You know what I said?
What?
At that point, I said, God, if you exist, print those things. And if you do, I will never question my faith in you. When I tell you these papers came out like there was a new batch of ink in the printer, I looked at the printer. I'm like, well, I guess I'm a devout believer now, because I said it. It was silly, but it happened. So hey, it is what it is. And that's my experience. People have different ways that their beliefs got reinforced. That they got their convictions. For me, this was it, a printer story. So um yeah, so I believe in that, in heaven and hell. And I think you can even see in anime, there's a lot of instances of that,
Oh yeah.
like Dragon Ball,
Yeah.
like Dragon Ball Z. Like, you see that there's a, and they took a very um visual representation route with it. Because remember the first time that Goku dies, he's on a snaky path all the way
Yeah.
to Kai and everything. Like, that's one thing. I wonder if Toriyama also struggled with the notion of life and death. And that's why, like, um when you watch Dragon Ball Z, the notion of death is made so, I feel like Toriyama makes light of it so much, to where it starts being as scary, because it's almost like he gives you an answer to those questions. It's like even when Goku dies, he's still around. He can still come back on Earth and hang out with his family and do things. So it's a very hopeful take on
Yeah.
death.
Really interesting.
It is.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed, like when people die, it's always we're always clinging to life, right? Even at the last moment of death, like if someone dies at war, and think, I mean, I've never seen it, but like when you imagine people dying, and when you see um death being depicted in movies, it's nearly always like just a fight. It's like they're just like, people are around them crying, and they're like gasping for their last breath. People are clinging to life, um, and they're trying to escape death for the most part, right? And I
Mhm.
think it's because we have so much in this life that we love, that we want to continue to experience, and subconsciously we kind of, I guess, know or assume that in death there's nothing to love or experience, because we're just going to be gone. So do you think that since I guess at this point it's also kind of the cat is out of the bag that we kind of view death as something harmful that happens to us, right? Death is not generally a positive or a good thing.
Mhm.
So, with that question, Teddy, do you think, with that in mind, Teddy, do you think that death is something that humanity should strive to rid themselves of? For example, if God or anything, right? I'm just saying you believe in God, so imagine God hands you in your hand a vial that would, if given to every human on the planet, rid them of death. So all humans live forever. And this would just assume for a moment, in this bubble, this perfect bubble, that this would have no negative impact to, like, population or the world or economy or anything like
So
that.
this is an ideal situation
An
for
ideal situation,
immortality.
yeah. Do you think
Like
that this is something humanity should strive towards, to escape death?
it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, right? Because I know there are people out there they want actually maybe not eternal life, but more so eternal youth, which the two get misconstrued a lot, but it's not the same because with eternal youth, you can still die. It's just that you stay young until the day you die, right?
Yeah.
But eternal life means that you're still existing throughout the ages and you're seeing so much of humanity and you see like evolution on a scale that no human, I believe, is meant to experience. That's just my personal opinion. Now, the reason why I say it depends on who you ask is because if you ask me, there's only one thing that scares me more than death, and
Yeah.
it's eternity. The concept of something that's never ending. Think about our lives. Everything about our reality is finite. If you think about it, like realistically, right? Everything comes to an end at some point. Even a job that you're in a routine for I don't know how many years, at some point, some things change. Nothing stays exactly the same forever. That's just the nature of human life. So for me, something about the concept of eternity feels very disturbing. Just imagine that you're like it just never ends. You're just there aware like forever because that's another thing too where even though I believe in heaven and hell, right, even that thought also scares me because I'm thinking, so you mean that my consciousness is just going to be around forever? And so what's if I ask you, can you imagine infinity?
Yeah,
can
it's
you
just
can you
it's
understand,
just
right?
it's just impossible. It's just too there's just too much
It's too
about
much.
it.
And it's like you understand that that means it's never ending, it just keeps going. And people say, oh yeah, when you go to heaven, you're it, you're in a state of joy forever. The joy is fine, I want the joy, give me the joy. The forever part though is where I struggle because it's just never ending. And I think a lot of times when people talk about immortality or infinity, I don't think they really appreciate what that really means. So that's why I said it depends on who you ask. But if you ask me, that's a terrifying proposal. And I say, no, please, by no means should we strive for any type of immortality whatsoever. And that's why I can't understand people like Orochimaru, bro.
Ah, no. Here we go with the Orochimaru,
I
or should we?
do.
Yeah,
What do you mean?
that guy is insane, man.
Like that's what he's aspiring. And it's funny because for him it comes from a place of trauma, right? Because
Yeah.
he saw the atrocities of war and how fragile human life can be. And he was like, nah, there's got to be a better way. There should be a way for us to transcend time. And it's like, okay, so you're going to just forever transfer your soul to different bodies. That just sounds like an exhausting existence. I don't want it.
Yeah, it's just this perpetual restlessness. I think like also another aspect of death, like you can look at it as rest, right?
Yeah.
If you just spoke about trauma, so like if you've had a really traumatic life and you've seen this expressed by people who've died, right? Where they say, "Look, my life has been hell. If
Oh,
I died, it would just be, and this is going to be heavy, but if I died, it would be rest. I would finally be gone
yes.
from this hell." And we've seen this from all types of anime characters, right? And all people just in general, right?
Yes.
Sakura from Fate Zero or Fate Stay Night in general, I mean, felt that. There's just so many characters. It's hard to
You want
really,
another example?
yeah,
Erwin from Attack on Titan.
yeah. Erwin from Attack on Titan, that's a great
Oh,
example as
that
well.
moment was iconic because, mind you, he really wanted to know the truth about the origin of the Titans and what existed beyond the walls, right? And yet, when he got presented with the opportunity to survive after they went up against the Beast Titan, he stopped Levi from injecting him with the Titan serum. He was like, "No, I'm tired. I can't keep going. I'm tired." That hit me so hard because you have to wonder what kind of life must one have to where when, as we discussed earlier, when most of us presented with an untimely death will struggle in trying to survive for as long as possible.
Yeah,
In this
Angel Beats.
situation, yeah, in the same situation, he was like, "No, I'm good." It's like it to me. That's like a reflection of how difficult his life must have been, how hellish it must have been, right? And it's for reasons like this. Whenever I hear people dismiss anime in general or make light of it or say, "Oh, it's for kids," there is a part of me that just wants to set them straight because we get these like what we're just talking about, like these themes that get tackled in very nuanced and deep ways. And you're gonna tell me this is for kids? A kid would
Yeah,
never be able to appreciate this. Like this is for grown folks. Like I just, oh God, the stigma that anime gets, it's not, it's gotten better over the years, but with social media and cosplay culture, there's a lot of people that still look at it as a goofy type of storytelling. Like, nah, you don't know, you don't know.
yeah. I mean, it is what it is. Like even Angel Beats. Um, you can't see an anime like Angel Beats, like Death Parade, and say that this is this is just kids play. This is just child's play. This is
No,
made for kids.
no,
It's just a bit
they pull at your
ridiculous.
heart. Yeah,
Yeah, Angel Beats is one that tackles death greatly as well. Just like Death Parade, actually, it's kind of almost
and
like a limbo state.
yeah, but they do get reincarnated at the end, right?
They
If I
get yeah they get reincarnated. Actually, the place they were at was like I guess to get
in between,
reincarnated all along. Yeah, like
yeah.
people that go there to I guess come to terms with the trauma that they faced in life, and once
Mhm.
they come to terms with that, then they get reincarnated basically. So it's a very hopeful outlook on death. It's
Oh
definitely
my,
more hopeful than this guy here on screen. This is a guy from Sword Art Online, and he's basically like with a smug face saying, "In every world, once you die, you're gone."
isn't that the creator of the game?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's kind of saying it like in a more literal sense because he's kind of talking about the Gun Gal Online situation that's going on. But it really comes into play with the conversation we're having now, and it kind of exemplifies that anime has a lot of deep themes. And I mean that's the reason why we had this whole conversation to begin with. We came up with the idea to do a topic on the meaning of death, because we are just thinking about all these instances in anime that they discuss that from Death Note to One Piece to Death Parade. all these different anime. I mean, it's really thought provoking, and it's kind of like opening up uh, you know, a jar of death jelly, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And the thing is, like many instances, it does like that. The idea of death gets tackled in different ways. There are times where it's very literal, like in Death Note and Death Parade and some of these uh, anime.
yeah.
And there are times where
Oh, I think you cut out, Teddy. Well, it looks like Teddy cut out, so let me continue on. So here we have a picture from this is from Kill La Kill, and this character says, "As the living, it is our responsibility to carry out the wishes of those who are gone." I was thinking of asking Teddy if he kind of subscribes to this ideology because there was that ideology that the Doctor in One Piece had, where he says you only die when you're forgotten. So if you only die when you're forgotten, it implies that someone has to remember you. And so is it our duty as the living? Are we responsible as living people to, I guess, carry out the wishes or just to simply remember those who are gone? Um, I do personally, I do feel a responsibility to carry the wishes and I guess the thoughts and the memory of those
oh gosh,
who have
thank you.
died.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're
My
good.
yeah, my thing did it again. Ah,
Oh,
it's
you're all good.
disgusting.
Did you get to hear what I was talking about?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I
No, you're
was
all
just
good.
like going off about the fact that there's also metaphorical deaths in anime, but I wanted you to talk about Akame real quick
Yeah.
before I went into that because yeah, it's about to be a crazy tangent.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, just real quick, I guess, just to sum it up, basically, she's talking about that it's our responsibility to carry out the wishes of those who've died. Now, we're talking about earlier the doctor, Dr. Hiluk. He says that people only die when they're forgotten, right? So if people die when they're forgotten, it implies that someone has to remember them.
Yes.
So, do you feel like you, as a living person, it's kind of your responsibility to remember those people and kind of keep them alive in a sense, carry out their wishes, as Akame's saying it? Do you feel that weight with people that have passed and how you've dealt with that? I know I was just talking about how I definitely do kind of agree with that in a sense. I definitely feel that with people I know who've died, family, friends. Whenever somebody I know that's close to me passes, I do get this overwhelming kind of weight, um, to where, obviously the memories just flush back into your head of them, right? Especially if it's an untimely death. All these memories just come rushing back into you, and you feel like, well, I feel like you have to remember them in some type of way. You have to, I guess, I feel a responsibility to use those memories and use the energy that they gave me as a person when I knew them in life, um, to just drive me forward and to keep me going forward in life.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you see that, if you understand, if you like have ever felt that, how you view that aspect of death and how it affects kind of the world of the living.
Remember which philosopher again was it that said that um basically the consequences of death are only felt by the living because when you're dead you don't have anything else to deal with, right?
Yeah,
So I appreciate that thought that you live you basically carry on the legacy of whoever died, right? But at the same time I look at it as you're doing it like, so this is where like I'm conflicted because if you say you're doing it for them, it's like how they're dead. So you're doing it, it's not doing anything for them because they're already gone, they're dead. So now at that point, you're doing it for yourself. And if you're doing it for yourself, then it's not really for them, is it?
Yeah.
Right. So it just kind of gets you thinking like that for a minute because it's like, okay, well, they're dead. So whatever I do with them in mind, it's nice and good, but it doesn't really change the fact that they're dead. But
Yeah.
it's a good thought, right? It's like I'm going to live my best. It's kind of like what I do with, I don't want to say this in a way that it's going to sound weird, but yeah, no, because what I'm gonna say is handicapped people, people that are restricted in their life by,
Yeah.
physical disabilities that's out of their control. I feel a personal responsibility to live my fullest life on their behalf because I know they wish they could and they can't. And they see us able bodied people and they're like, you better make full use of your limbs because God knows I would if I had them or if I could. So in that sense, I can understand relating back to death, how you'd be living your life in their honor, essentially, right? And it's tricky. It's tricky. I feel like
Yeah.
your motivation can determine whether or not it's the right path.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the way I see it is this, and I guess how would you tackle this situation then? Let's say you um had a friend, right? It was your best friend. You knew each other since childhood, and they had always told you they had a kid, right? And you knew their
yeah.
kid. You're their godfather, whatever, right? And they had told you before they died that they always wanted to take their son to Italy. They always wanted to take their son to Italy to see Venice, right? To see the water, the beautiful city, the sunken city, right?
Mhm.
This kid now, unfortunately, is left fatherless, and let's just say they have nobody else. The mother's gone. They have nobody else in the family. He's going under a foster home, but this will that the father had and your friend had literally only lives on in you. Even though his soul is gone, his will it still basically lives on in a sense, figuratively speaking, in you because you're the last person that knows about it apart from, obviously his little kid. Now, would you take the opportunity if you can in this perfect world to take the kid to Venice?
100%. I'm glad you said that because that's actually the next point I was going to make. Like you kind of say where I was going to take a different example and say, let's say that my friend or whoever dies had a non let's say that they had a nonprofit, right? That they
Yeah,
were working on, and they really believed in the vision, and they wanted to basically change their community for the better, but they weren't able to do it. Time didn't allow, they died or whatever. At that point, yes, I would definitely take up the mantle and try to make their dream come true. I feel like that's an example where it's a very tangible, um, I guess, inheritance of somebody else's will and legacy. Right? Like I feel like in this instance, it's like you got something very clear to go back to in saying that you're carrying that dead person's legacy. I feel like that's different from when they just died and you're carrying their memory with you.
yeah,
You know? And that's okay. Quick side tangent. I swear I'm gonna try not to make it too long.
yeah,
Remember how we talked about Dr. Hillock and everything
yeah.
with Chopper? That's why I hate Chopper so much.
Oh, here we go.
Because I know. I had to do it. I had to do it because it's so frustrating to me that he's experienced such a traumatic experience with Dr. Hillock's death and how it happened. If I were him, I would dedicate my life to always saving people whenever I had the chance, or if I can't, at least try. And in recent times, he has not looked like the kind of competent doctor that I thought he could be. Like a lot of the time, he's be getting outside help to get certain things done. And I understand that maybe that's a way of others saying that at the end of the day, even the greatest of doctors, they still need the help. But there's just something about it that I guess the way it's shown, right? And then that face, and then that stinking face. Oh
Oh, here we go.
God. I mean, it's fine if you're just on the boat, on the ship, and you're just dilly dallying. There's nothing critical going on, right? So you don't need to be serious and everything. But even in certain serious moments, he just loses his edge,
So
especially as
you
a,
think that, would you say, Teddy, that Chopper is kind of, I guess, not either, to put it lightly, not carrying Dr. Hillock's memory well, or even disgracing him?
I wouldn't say disgracing him because
Yeah.
he's actor. He's still, he has substantial. It's he's
He's not living up to the full potential.
he- like you see with say with somebody like Zorro, who really believes he can be the strongest swordsman. You see how seriously he takes that and how hard he trains. We
Yeah.
saw, you can see how passionate he is.
After Queen is that too, which was what inspired him, Zoro.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And with Sanji, you can see the passion when he cooks. And with him, every time you see him in a situation where his cooking is needed, he shines because it's something that he takes very seriously. It's his craft. And I rarely ever get that feeling from Chopper,
Yeah.
and knowing his background with Dr. Hillock, it hurts my spirit every time. So when I see it, his existence now pisses me off. It's sad to say because I feel like he has just so much potential.
Oh, so his existence is not good to you. You think he needs to cease to exist now?
No, I didn't say
Chopper
that.
needs to he needs
Say
to
that.
get out and he needs
I
to
don't.
get 86th.
You're spinning my words, sir. That is not what I said. He has potential, and the fact that he's not living up to it is making his existence irritating to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
but
I mean, I
yeah,
think with all these examples, that I'm glad you brought that up because it brings even more into perspective, like that death, even though death is basically, in our opinion, a ceasing of existence, it affects what already does exist, right? It affects the world of the living. So, you even see this with Luffy, right? Where when Ace died, that affected a lot because he, after that, went crazy. He went ballistic. He went in the forest and just started like hurting himself, basically trying to hurt other people too. And he had to come to the realization that it's basically like Jinbei said, it's not about what you've lost, it's about what you still have, right? Um, so yeah, it does affect the world of the living. Definitely does affect the world of the living, and whether it's something we should strive to rid ourselves of, or whether it's something we should just learn to cope with or accept, that is up to the individual. Now, when it comes to me, I'm not gonna lie. I would like to see what immortality would entail. What basically
interesting.
would happen if you couldn't die. Now, of course, this is in the perfect world, right? That we're
Hmm.
talking about. Like with
Yeah.
no negative connotation or side effects to economy or just like life in general. If we were able to somehow get rid of death and remove that aspect from humanity, yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to see what that would entail because this is the thing about death, right? most people would agree that death is harmful. Most people would, and like we brought up before, when you get cut, when you get a paper cut, you flinch. When you're drowning in a pool or something, you're gasping for air. You like the essence of humanity is to cling to life in a sense, as the way I see it. And so when you're clinging to life, it's because it kind of implies that you're running away from death, and it kind of implies that death is something negative. It's something bad. It's the boogeyman. It's something that we do not want any part of. We do not want to be near. So I do wonder how it would affect us. There's like a bunch of ideologies that have sprouted because of death and because of, I guess, human existence and the human condition.
Hmm.
A bit cringe, but YOLO, that whole movement is basically you only live once. So the idea is kind of like that: you're gonna die,
So
and
might as well make the most of it.
you might as well make the most of it. I don't know how you subscribe to that. I've heard people say this, Teddy, that we may die tomorrow, so we may as well live today to the fullest. Now, I don't know if you think that death is in some way beneficial because it does bring some of these ideologies and kind of philosophies that can, I guess, help people get through their daily lives. Do
Mhm.
you think death is kind
Or
of necessary?
help them live their lives to the fullest as much as possible.
Yeah,
Um, See, I think th- you could argue there is some positive from that. The problem with anything is that it can get twisted in a way where it stops being beneficial, right? Because people will use that ideology of YOLO to justify doing very just committing asinine acts, right? Just absolute ridiculousness and silliness, and justified under the guise of you only live once, so you might as well do it, you know. And to me, it's just that's where it starts being beneficial because then, like, how do you monitor, how do you regulate that, right? And also, one thing I was gonna say is that we may look at death negatively, but just because we look at it that way doesn't necessarily mean that it is inherently,
yeah,
right? I think it's just our nature to want to uh, be alive, and that's just in our nature. We want to be alive and thrive and everything. I feel like if we were you and I, we were 40 to 50 years older, this conversation will be a lot different
yeah,
because we're still fairly young. We still have a lot of life ahead of us by societal standards, right? But I wonder how you think when you're older and you've already lived so much life. There's only so much that you can experience that is going to stimulate you in any way. And you're thinking, okay, well, I think, now I'm good. I'm ready. Right. And that's why I say that I don't know that the human mind is built for immortality, because you're thinking, oh, it would be interesting to see, and I agree, it would be interesting to see what immortality looks like if we can make it practical. Right. I don't even want to argue the practicality of it or not, because I feel like that's just detracts from the point. But essentially, I don't think the human mind can understand or fathom the concept of immortality, because yes, we want to cling on to life for as much as possible, but our bodies, they deteriorate over time. Our minds, they get older. Our souls grow older. So if we had immortality, like the closest thing I can think of that we would look like is vampires, right?
Yeah.
in stories where they get depicted as those entities that have been living for centuries and sometimes millennia, depending on the vampire. And you can see they are completely disillusioned with life a lot of the time. They just look at humans just like, oh gosh, such fleeting existences, you know. So I don't know. I don't know that um, immortality would be something that's good for the mind.
Yeah, and death is such an individual thing. Like I, I have a kind of weird thought to kind of bring up, and this is something I've thought about a lot, right? Just the act of dying, the moment of death, right? I don't
Yeah.
know if you've thought about this. This might be scary to some people, but when I think of my last moments on this earth,
Mhm.
I basically imagine, when you're dying, I imagine as you're just running out of breath. You just have no more breath. You take your last breath, right? And then after
Essentially,
that, you have nothing else. So, you know, I kind of almost liken it to drowning, where you have no more breath. You're gonna try to take a breath, and there's no air for you, and you're just going to fade. And to me, that's pretty scary, because when I'm drowning, if I have my head underwater and I'm 9 feet deep in the pool and I'm nowhere near the surface of the water, I am clawing and grasping and doing everything in my power to get back up
yes.
and float. And so that's the feeling that I imagine that I'm probably going to feel when I'm on my deathbed and getting my last breath. That's just the way I see it. I
Yeah.
don't know if like other people see it a different way, or if there's like a different, there's just maybe like a peace that comes over you, but I don't see any peace that can come over you like while you're drowning. Like I just don't see it.
So it's the way it's framed, right? Because you're framing it in terms of um you're in a pool and you're drowning.
Yeah.
Framing it in terms of you're walking in the desert. You're just walking. You just keep going without end. You just keep going. Eventually, there will come a point where you are willing to stop and say, you know what, I just need to rest now. Right. So I feel like depending on the imagery that you go with, you're gonna have different uh a different response or different reaction. Not saying that one is valid over the other. I'm just saying I think it's something where depending on what stage of life you're in, you're gonna have a different approach to it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's actually why I opened up that example by saying like death is a very individual thing, because it brings me to another point. And there's this fact, that this kind of factoid that has floated around for years, right? Where basically when we die, DMT is released. So DMT is released upon death, and if you don't know about DMT, it's basically like kind of like the same compound or component that is found in hallucinogenic drugs. Um, so there's this kind of theory that people have that when you die, um, you're basically gonna go into kind of like a cosmic drug trip. And depending on how you view death and how you view your life and how satisfied you are, and kind of the thoughts you go into dying with, it could be a good trip or a bad trip. It could be a heaven or a hell. So that's kind of like kind of bro sciencey way that people look at death. I don't know if you've heard that, if you've thought about that at all as well. If you think that has some validity to it.
Dude, honestly, I have no clue. That's the first time I hear this.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Dude, I don't know.
that is such a mystery, man, and it's so interesting. Like DMT being released upon death, like why is that like a response?
Have you heard about this thing that apparently at the moment of death, like the body loses 21.3 grams or something along those lines, and people have said that that's the how much the soul weighs.
Oh yeah, I think I've
I
heard
heard
of that.
folklore about it, yeah. And I mean, it was even mentioned in One Piece actually recently with Vegapunk and all that stuff. He
Yeah.
talked about that, and I think it was also mentioned. I forget where. I read that recently too, but yeah, basically, it's like 21.3 grams is how much a soul is supposed to weigh
Dude,
because yeah,
that's insane.
I know.
And like with the soul example and the grams and the DMT example, like it kind of brings this scary thought to mind. Like, imagine this, Teddy: heaven and hell, the afterlife, they exist. Reincarnation, imagine it exists, but it's all just in your head.
Mm,
It's all entirely in your head. It's all just a product of that DMT release and the last bits of your consciousness putting that together to basically put you in a dream. Basically like a Madara Infinite Tsukiyomi.
Infinite Tsukuyomi,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, like
yeah.
that's kind of creepy, man, if that is the case. And and that's just the way it is too. Like that's a great example as well. The Infinite Tsukiyomi, where you're basically escaping death, right? Kind of in a sense, and you're living this perfect life. And of course, we saw the answer that Kishimoto gave us with that we shouldn't do that. We should we should basically take life as is and work to make it better. And L is here on screen. He's saying, "There is no heaven or hell. No matter what you do while you're alive, everybody goes to the same place once you die. Death is equal." I don't know how you. I mean, Teddy, you agree with heaven or hell? Like you think heaven or hell is real? So what do you have to say to L, bro,
Well,
about
I
this?
believe. See, that's the thing, right? I don't know that it exists. I believe it exists.
You believe, yeah, you believe.
Yeah. So with what L is saying, I can't fight him on it. I have no proof. All I have is my beliefs, right?
Hey,
But
man.
one thing that he says that it's like it's kind of true is the fact that death is equal. It is one thing that doesn't discriminate is death because it comes to everybody all the same at some point in their lives. You
Yeah.
cannot escape it. It's just a reality of
Oh,
the
let me
human
show you this.
experience. You know, it's
Yeah.
fine. So, yeah, no, I think he's definitely on the money with that for the most part.
Let me show you this. You're gonna love this after what you just said. You seeing this, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm seeing it. Yeah.
Shiki, man. Shiki. Okay. Very underrated anime. If you haven't watched it, watch it. Um, and this is Suniko, one of my favorite characters in the show. She says, "I think death is equally terrible for everyone. Young people, old people, the good, the bad. It's always the same. It's rather fair in its treatment. There's no such thing as a particularly terrible death. That's why it's frightening." And she kind of says
I
what you just
disagree.
said. Oh, you disagree? Okay,
Yeah,
like cook,
yeah.
cook, cook.
Because I'd say like it's death itself is fair and equal, but how it affects everybody is not fair and equal because as we've spoken about in previous examples, like with Erwin and Talatine and others, there are people who seek it at some point where their lives has been so difficult and they're presented with the opportunity of either dying or surviving somehow. They choose to just let it go because they're tired.
Yeah,
And you have other people that cling on to life. They're like, no, death, don't come for me just yet. I haven't lived a full life yet. You can't take me, right? So the experience near death is not equal across the board. So it's not equally terrible for everybody, like she says. I think for some people, it's a source of salvation, while for other, like imagine, right? Imagine you are terminally ill. Let's say you have some kind of cancer that's eating at you, and all they can do is hook you up to IV drip and trying to keep you alive. But you're not able to live life on your own terms. You're just in that bed, being kept alive like a vegetable. For some people, they'd rather die than live a life where they're not able to do anything, or they're not able to function on their own power. Well, some other people, they might still cling on to it for the hope that maybe one day they'll be able to regain control of their bodies, right? So it's very different across the board depending on who you ask and what
Yeah.
kind of circumstances they're in. That's why I'm like, she has some truth there, but the whole thing isn't necessarily true when you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I probably if you're regarding like the state of death, then this statement is true. But if you're regarding like, you know,
Exactly.
the actual act of death, like how you die when you
Yeah.
die, like obviously that's gonna be different. Like
Yeah.
if I die just from old age, it's gonna be way better than dying from being like absolutely tortured and like, you know, yeah, let's just say tortured. You know what I'm saying? For
Mhm.
the YouTube algorithm, that it's way better to just like pass from old age. I would say.
That's ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, than to be like absolutely incinerated, like burned up slowly, slow cooked, like a braised sausage or something. Like that
Is
would be
braised
just
sausage even a thing? A quick side note.
probably in Germany or something like that. They love sausages out there.
I don't know if they braised it though, but yeah, okay, okay.
They braise it. Hold on, let me just real quick.
Just a quick side tangent.
Yeah,
I'm curious because when you say braised sausage, it sounds good, but I don't know if that's a cooking technique for sausage. So that's
yeah,
like,
yeah. Look at it right here.
oh, braised
Yeah,
sausage. That's
I think
my fault.
I've actually seen Gordon Ramsay do something like this,
You
like
know what?
braised
He
sausage
probably
and
would.
bean.
Yeah, yeah, he probably would. Okay. Yeah, that looks legit. That looks legit. All right.
I would assume that it would be a slow braise though, because like, you know, the concept of braising is so like with like a short rib or like a really hard like
It's a
chuck meat.
long, long process. Yeah.
Yeah, it's meant to tenderize the meat, but with sausage, the meat is already pretty much like tender. It doesn't need to be cooked so long.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering because if you braise sausage, is it still sausage when it's done? I guess it is based on those images.
Oh my gosh, man. And you see, this is yet another reason why we need to escape death. Because if we were to die like 15 seconds ago before we had searched this up, we would have never known the glory of braised
Mm,
sausages.
the glory
So
brings
so there we go. You know what I'm saying?
us sick. But yeah, you yeah, that's true. But
So
uh
Teddy,
yeah,
there's this guy. I was reading this on a Reddit post that was discussing death, right? And I want you to hear this what this guy says, right? Now, he says, I'm imagine Teddy, someone comes up to you and tells you this, look, I'm 19 years old. I don't want to die. There's no evidence that leads me to believe that there's anything after death, and that terrifies me to no end. I love life. I haven't experienced all there is to do and see. I just met a girl not all that long ago that I love, and I have amazing friends and a fun job at a bookstore. I'm a college student who goes to be an environmental scientist. I might even want to be an English professor one day. I know I haven't decided yet, but if I was offered immortality, I would take it in a heartbeat. When it comes down to it, living is the most valuable thing on this planet, and too many people lose that every day. Now, how do you feel about that, Teddy? Like this is a real person saying this. This is somebody like just spilling out how they feel about death. They love life, and life is an experience, and to die is to cease to have those experiences, and they don't want to give that up.
well,
And
but
so,
this is the thing, right?
yeah,
I agree with this. I don't see like to me that's a natural answer to have as a human being. You want to be able to enjoy your life to the fullest and live your best life. What her statement implies is that there will never be a time where she will be satisfied with how much life she's lived. That's the idea behind what she's saying. And I guess just like this plate, she wants to experience all the best foods in life, right?
Yeah,
But
thing looks good. It looks busted.
this is, dude, it looks fire. But this is my thing where I'm wondering, is this something that she would always feel? Because remember, I said this earlier, the human experience is finite. Nothing about us is infinite. Nothing. You can think about any aspects of life in existence, and nothing is infinite. There is a beginning, there is an end. You go to work, you get off work. You go to sleep, you wake up. Like everything is either cyclical, but it has a beginning and an end. Just like our lives have a beginning and an end. And I think that no matter how much we may not like the idea of death, it is wired within us to know that there is a beginning and there's an end.
Yeah,
And the closer you get to that end, the less, I want to say, the less daunting it feels. But that's what I'm saying, where I want to see what old folks have to say because this is young people talking. I want to see the perspective of somebody who has lived a long life, who's experienced a lot, see what they have to say about it.
yeah,
Do they also feel like, oh no, I don't want to die yet. I still have so imagine you're 100 years old and you're thinking, I still have so much more to live and experience.
yeah,
Really? I'd be curious to see if that's real, if that actually happens, because then I'll stand corrected because it's like I guess for some people, no matter how much life they've lived, they always want more. And then for those people, I guess immortality would be beneficial, like we were talking about earlier. Yeah. That's what it wasn't that what Dio was struggling with?
yeah. He actually was. And this is
Yeah.
like this is crazy because death kind of across the board in anime is explored in so many, even in Bleach. It's explored, like it's always there, like because death is kind of a universal theme for us humans, and it's gonna leak into, you know, um our media, our art, our films, our paintings, what have you. It's always gonna be there, and you can't really escape it. So all you can do is express it. And even this, Teddy, look at Cowboy Bebop. This guy, this character saying, "Man always thinks about the past before he dies, as if he were frantically searching for the proof that he truly lived." That's Jet Black from Cowboy Bebop.
Ooh, that's a bar. Ooh, that's a heavy bar.
Yeah, don't
Hey,
underestimate Cowboy Bebop.
that's a funny thing about Cowboy Bebop. It has nuggets of gold like this, but the whole thing is a snooze fest for me, which
Yeah,
is sad because it has some of the best animation and action scenes that I've seen ever. But for some reason, something about I don't know if it's just the story, the color palette, something about it. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it just bores me.
yeah.
So I haven't been able to like I've started watching it again recently, um trying to get back into it, and I I I stopped again because I couldn't do it. I'm hoping that eventually I get to a place where I can fully enjoy it, but this is a bar.
It's almost making you want to try again.
Yeah, low key, I ain't gonna lie to you, I ain't gonna hold you. I'm like, hey yo, this man J Black cooking. I'm not sure what the full roster of the menu looks like, but he definitely cooking.
Yeah. And
And
Teddy, I actually I listened to what you said, and I found some quotes from some older people, and this person says, well, this is actually a quote from Harry Potter. A bit of a non-anime reference, but Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Um, it's slightly edited, but this is basically like kind of what it says in the book. To one as young as you, death seems mysterious and terrifying. But to one as old as I, it really is like going to bed after a very, very long day.
yeah, I thought as much. That's why you see the difference between the analogy of being 9 meters underwater at the deep end of the pool versus walking in the desert.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's what he just said. It's
Yeah.
like, you're in that pool. I'm walking. I've been walking for ages now, and I'm getting weary. I'm getting tired.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it is.
And this person kind of says it in a way that I think of it more so nowadays. This is the way I view it. Like
Yeah.
I used to view as drowning when I was younger, but this is more so the way I view it now. Every night I go to bed. 7 hours later, I wake up. For those 7 hours, it's as if I were dead. So one day I will sleep forever. I'm at 73 now, and it draws nearer. So it goes. So I'm right now, like, and I mentioned this before, death to me is kind of like I view it a lot more like sleep, to where you just close your eyes and it's just nothing. It's just a void. Boom. You're not even aware of your existence. It's just that's it.
Yeah.
Um, and to me,
And
I'm
that's
actually okay with that. I'm actually okay with that. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, like, that's the funny thing about it, where to me, something like that is it like it's so weird. It depends on the day. Like, I hate this because there's days where I think about it in those terms and I think that it's pretty peaceful actually. And then there's other days where I think about it and I'm like, oh God, I just like my consciousness just stops to exist. And I feel like based I'm a walking contradiction because I believe in heaven or hell, right? But both of these notions are associated with infinity, right? Never ending forever, which are notions that scares the bejesus out of me, right? Yet I'm like, but the thought of just non-existence at all whatsoever can also be daunting. So it's like some things you gotta give. There's times when I'm just like you. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? If you just cease to exist, then you don't have a consciousness. So if you don't have a consciousness, you can't be anxious or in pain or in anguish about anything now, can you?
Yeah.
Because you just cease to exist. Damn, it's crazy how this thing is coming full circle, isn't it? But
Yeah, this is insane. It
yeah,
really is
I
kind of
know. Just
insane. Yeah.
thinking about it, I'm like, dude, that's crazy. That's crazy. But that's why sometimes I can understand Dio, man. He just wanted peace of mind. He was like, hey, oh, yo, oh my God, yeah, because that's the thing that happened with Pucci also, right? Because he was like, the reason why people fear death is because they don't know their destiny. So if you know how your life is gonna play out, you don't have any reason to fear. And that's what both Dio and Pucci were working on together.
Yeah.
It's like you can achieve true inner peace through the knowledge of your destiny. Mm. You think it works that way? Do you think that if you just know exactly how your life is going to play out, that you can live more at peace, knowing? I guess I can see the
Yeah.
logic
I
behind
mean,
it, but I don't know, man.
let me tell you this, Teddy. I've thought about this many times, and I know a lot of people have thought this many times. Right? If you could restart your life over with the knowledge you have now and the same mind you have now, the same consciousness you have
So
now, you're
basically,
just
isekai.
yeah. But you're isekai back into your own life.
Yeah,
Would you? And my answer is yes. Hell yeah. I
dude,
would
in a
make
heartbeat.
I would make all the regrets of my life go away. All of the bad decisions I made, I would just change them and make the what I think would be the good decision. Certain years I wasted doing whatever it is, um whatever I see as a waste of time, right? I just wouldn't do that, and I would instead, um spend my time doing other things, and that's just the way I see it. So I do agree with Pucci and Dio actually in that sense, where I think that people knowing of their fate in advance, kind of like a future sight, Katakuri, One Piece type of thing, where you're able to see how it plays out. so you're able to move accordingly and either change it or, keep it that way.
Yeah.
I think that would be ideal because then you would not go through life kind of with the blindfold on, and you would know that for the most part, by the time you die, you will at least be satisfied with the way your life went. And I think it would make death easier. I think that the way you live affects the way you die just as much as death itself affects the way you live.
Mm. Ooh, that's heavy, but that makes sense. That's true. See, yeah. And it's interesting because what you just said is so true, right? Like if you're given the opportunity to be reborn with your current knowledge and having lived all those experiences, be reborn to your own life. I believe you would be foolish not to take up, that offer. Um, but there are times where people do that, where they're essentially they die and they're reborn, but it's not always necessarily for the best.
Yeah.
You know who I'm thinking of when I'm saying this?
Who?
Griffiths.
Griffith? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, yeah. You can say that he experienced a metaphorical and almost literal death, really, and rebirth, right? Through his transformation into a damn near deity. And he he looked at see the same way that you're saying that you would basically undo all the wasted time, the regrets and all that stuff. He looked at that moment with the behemoth as an opportunity to kind of erase his mistakes and go for his ideal world,
Yeah.
right? And that's why he did. And that's it's always a tough conversation to have, because I understand his motivations. I don't condone of his actions, but I understand. And I feel like sometimes people they don't even want to understand it, understand where it's coming from. They just condemn the act. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure that
Yeah.
if you're in that same position, mind you, he wasn't even in his right state of mind anymore, because at that point he had been both physically and mentally abused beyond anything a human being should be able to endure. Right. But he survived it somehow. And you
Yeah,
know,
he wanted to basically escape his fragile human condition, and he was willing
yes.
to do anything to be able to do that. And I think deep down inside, the spirit of Griffith is kind of in all of us, in the sense that we cling to life in that way too. We If we were in that same position, a lot of us would maybe have done the same. Maybe
Oh
not in
yeah.
the same way that he did it, but we would choose to, I guess, get rid of our human condition and ascend to a state where we won't die, where we won't be weak anymore, where we won't have to fear death, and where we can basically be quote unquote ideal or perfect. And that's kind of the scary thing about Griffith, is that he kind of is similar to us. And now
You know
I
what?
want to,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, go ahead, real
I was
quick.
gonna say real quick, I feel like he's a mirror that reflects the side of most human beings that they don't want to face, and that's why people hate him so much, because
Yeah,
they see the potential for that madness in them, and they don't want to admit to it. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Now, I wanted to ask this question, and this is kind of like a fun little thought exercise that I just thought of right now while you were talking. Bleach, right?
Mhm.
The Shinigami. Now, when you think of the Shinigami, in Bleach, you don't really associate them with this, but basically, they're Soul Reapers. They're basically like anime versions of the Grim Reaper, right?
Yes.
So let's say that one day God gives you the ability to be the Grim Reaper, to be a Soul Reaper in the real world. How would you decide when people die? You're basically given in your hands the power. You're the only one with this power to decide when people die. How do you decide? How do you go about deciding that?
Well, isn't it, if I remember correctly, the way that Soul Reapers function or Grim Reapers, they don't necessarily have any command over who dies. They just know when somebody's gonna die.
Yeah, they know the
And
specific time.
yeah, so they
They know the
so
specific time.
they're they're kind of like Thanos in where they're inevitable. Like, it's not even a question of if how no, is you're about to die and I've come to collect. Right? It's
Yeah.
they come to get your soul. So in that sense, it's like I I don't really have much command over
Yeah,
how
but
that
let's
happens.
say you do. The exercise is like to say
Oh,
if
oh,
you
so
do
so
have,
you're saying in the hypothetical situation, I do have control
yeah,
over that?
like it's basically put into you. What would you think is the ideal, I guess, quota or requirements that you would see a person, you say, okay, I'm the Grim Reaper, I have the scythe in my hand. It's time to go, basically.
Dude, I don't know. I feel like that's so arbitrary. Like, because how do you decide when somebody has lived enough,
Yeah.
you know?
Can you live
And
enough? Like,
that's another question as well. Can you live? I feel like for some people you can. Like, some people, their life peaked at 25. Maybe they had like all the money they could ever wish for. If you're a guy, you got all kinds of women and accolades and things of that nature. So it depends. Like, I'm pretty sure you can ask some homeless people and they'll tell you that their life peaked at a specific point in the past. And if a Grim Reaper had come at that point and said, "Hey, I'm taking you," it'd be funny because at that point they're at the highest of their enjoyment of life, right? So they don't think that it's just going south from there. So when you're showing up, they're probably thinking, "No, no, 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 I'm not ready. Go away." And can you imagine you're there as a Grim Reaper trying to explain to him, like, no, you don't understand. It's only south from here. I'm here to help you essentially go out on a high. If you
yeah,
don't come with me now, you're about to suffer until you become homeless before I come get you again. Is that what you want? Um, but yeah, I feel like it's a tough situation to be put in. It's kind of like light with the Death Note, if you ask me.
that's what I was just about to say,
Yeah.
because that aspect of the Grim Reaper job would be hard. But I feel like in other instances it would be easy. Where there's some people that I feel like you can just look and you're like, okay, you know what? It's just time to
Gotta
die.
go.
You've done too much. You did too much wrong to this world.
So,
This
so you gotta go.
is you gotta go. Like,
Pack
yeah,
it up, boss. You gotta go. Ah,
yeah,
man, that's tough. But see, that's the funny thing because I've told about Death Note to a lot of people who are not necessarily into anime, and I'm just introducing them to it. And it's like, okay, what is your what do you think of this? That you think, what would you do if you had your hands on something like this? And most people are like, oh no, I would not use it because who am I to say when somebody should die? And I
yeah,
never I never push the question because some people aren't always the most comfortable with those kinds of conversations. But I'll be like, but what if they actually deserve to die? Or what if they were criminals? Or what if they say, they rape children or something? Usually that's a good go-to. Usually most people are ready to kill child molesters or child sex abusers. Um, but it'd be like, oh, what in this particular situation would you write their name in that death note? I feel like even then some people still wouldn't because they still believe that they have no right to decide when another human being should live or die. Which I agree, it's a noble stance to have. I don't know that I'm that noble though. If I see somebody that I'm like, you are a vermin. Your existence is detrimental to society as a whole. You gotta go. Gotta pack
yeah.
it up. I'm sorry. Um, we can't do it. Like, it wouldn't be easy because, mind you, we're talking about this casually, like this is a hypothetical, but this is essentially murder, right? Like you're writing somebody's name, you're knowing full well this person is dying from directly from your action.
Oh
So
yeah, for
it's
sure.
murder, right? So it's not light. It's not light. You see what I did there?
Oh yeah. It's the yeah, it's not it
Not
ain't a
a
good
light
look.
decision, but sometimes you just you see something you're faced with a situation, you're like, okay, you know what, it has to be done. It has to be done. And
Yeah.
dude, I would rock the hell out of her. I would agree with her coat. That coat looked fire.
Oh hell yeah, especially if it's a bleach type like
Oh,
Soul
dude,
Reaper,
yeah. Then you can
Captain's
customize
coat.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's over. Yeah, oh, they gave you a bankai. It's not even a scythe, it's like a bankai.
Oh God.
Listen, it's over. It's over. So let me ask you this, Teddy. So Nietzsche, he's a philosopher, very famous philosopher. He's talked about like the importance of like dying at the right time. So he basically says this: in your dying, your spirit and virtue should still glow like a sunset around the earth, else your dying has turned out badly. Do
Huh?
you agree with that?
What? Wait, say that again. I don't
Yeah.
think I even.
You know how it is with these like,
He
18
must have been high than
1800 BC, as you know,
back
okay.
then. The ganja was not regulated. He was on some ridiculous doses of ganja to have thought of
Yeah,
that.
so he says
Go
in
ahead.
your dying, your spirit in the ganja. So in your dying, your spirit and virtue should still glow like a sunset around the earth, else your dying has turned out badly. So basically, to rephrase, just in case people listening to, it's kind of worded weirdly. So when you die, your spirit and your virtue should glow like a sunset around the earth. Otherwise, you're dying, basically turned out badly. You're dying in a bad way. So you're dying in a good way if your spirit and virtue are glowing. And if they're not, then your dying has turned out badly. Do you agree with that? Is he just being a hippie? Like, is it too vague? What is he getting at there? Do you think?
Basically, he's saying in really fancy dancing kumbaya terms is,
What the?
well, it's true. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
unprecedented doses of ganja. So
yeah,
what he's saying, right, is that you should have no regrets about how you lived your life on your moment of death. Like you should be able to look back on your life and think positively of it and
yeah,
be like, hey, I lived a good life. It was it was fruitful, it was fulfilling, and I don't necessarily know that everybody has, because what he's saying to me is like it's idealistic, but it's not necessarily realistic.
yeah,
Where you could say that and think, oh yeah, I want that to happen, but is like everybody sometimes they have regrets about, like, on the moment of death. Like, think back to like Jiraiya, for example, when he died. He had some regrets, right? I mean, he was happy that he got to mentor uh um Naruto, but I'm pretty sure he regretted that he mentored Nagato because he died at his hands ultimately, right? So it's like it's a mix of everything. I think most people, they're not necessarily going to look back on their lives and like their entire lives and think, oh yeah, this was a perfect life. My energy is glowing. Look at this chakra all around me. Yeah, I'm about to go to heaven. Like, no, that's not that's not what it is. I think for a lot of people, it's more so, overall, am I satisfied with the way I lived my life? Because there were definitely bumps in the road, but we made the most of it. You know, that's
yeah.
that's the idea. At the end of the day, I think that's the healthiest approach to have at that point in time. Is, you know, did I live a good, fulfilling life overall, or did I mostly mess up? So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there's this really awesome quote from Mark Twain that I like. It says, "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and I had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it." And that's kind of a philosophy that I apply not just about with like in regards to death. That's just something I kind of carry in a way with other things too. Like for example, like if I'd been dating a girl for a year or two and we break up, of course it's gonna suck, and I'm gonna go through kind of the stages of grief with that and the breakup and stuff. Um, but ultimately, the thought that I always go back to is, well, I was born without this person. I can definitely continue living without this person. Like it's not necessary for me to have this person's love in order to exist or in order to strive or succeed in life.
Mhm.
So I think in a way, Mark Twain um, is kind of saying that about death, where he does not fear death because, I mean, he'd been dead for billions and billions of years before he
so
was ever born, and he never experienced anything from it.
so here's my thing, right? And
Yeah,
I hate to come across as a contrarian, because that is never my intention in those conversations. It's just that there's certain things that are said that get me thinking, and I'm like, well, I feel like we need to consider this aspect of the conversation
yeah,
as well.
that's great.
The difference between the billions and billions of years he speaks of and his actual death is that he's talking about a state where he never existed. The difference is now you have existed.
Yeah,
So you
and he
can't
will
just
cease.
say, yeah, like you go from a state of existing to ceasing to exist. Before you went from non-existence to existence. So it's not the same, right?
Yeah,
The experience is not the same. So you can't say, I mean, again, right? It's a positive way to look at it, but I just have a tendency to look at the pragmatic side of things too, where it's like,
yeah.
well, just we look at it just objectively, it's not a one-to-one,
It's not the yeah. It's not.
you
It's not
know.
really. It's applicable in some ways, but not like 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I mean that's perfect. That's exactly what we want for this podcast. Like we want to ask questions. We're by no means, like we said in the beginning of the podcast, we're no experts. Um, you know, we're just having conversations, talking some anime, talking some philosophy, and hoping to make some sense of some of these bigger, broader topics regarding life, death, nihilism, stoicism, whatever it is that we're gonna tackle on this channel moving forward. Um, and we're just always going in with that open mind, that kind of critical lens to be able to experience a new, I guess, thought process
Yeah,
on
look
a
look
familiar
at
topic.
things from a different perspective. And also, mind you, not every podcast is going to be this heavy, right? Like there's going to be times when our conversations are about more lighthearted topics. Not always going to be like heavy. Although, although I'm looking at the lineup of the things we want to talk about next, and that every one of them in their own right can be kind of heavy.
It
So
can be kind of heavy, yeah, but
it just depends.
yeah, but hopefully this one was fun for people to listen to. I know it was definitely fun for me talking about this. I feel like we covered so many different kind of aspects of death and so many
Oh,
different
oh
types of
yeah,
questions.
oh
Did
yeah.
you have did you have anything, Teddy, before we go? Like anything you really wanted to talk about that we didn't get to cover yet?
I felt like I did, but what ended up happening was that through the flow of conversation, it would just come up randomly. So I don't think there's anything left that I can think of.
Yeah,
And if there is, it's probably going to hit me when I'm in the shower as usual. So,
yeah.
uh,
And hey, that's the beauty of YouTube and podcasts. Look, if we wake up the next morning, or if we hop in the shower after this, and we're like, "Hey, man, like, I just remember this," you know. Let me get back in the voice call with Raven and let him know.
get back
we
to the lab and cook.
we could always get back and run this back for like a episode 2. Um, and even if you guys, anyone listening, if you have any thoughts about anything that we've said, if you think you can
Any
elaborate more, yeah, anything you want to add to the conversation, leave it in the comments below, and it might spark yet another conversation for an episode 2 or something like that, right, Teddy?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Especially because, as we said, we will never pretend to be experts on anything. We're individuals who think deeply about certain topics, and we like to discuss and share our views and opinions on said topics. So, we're just trying to create a platform for open discussion and trying to create new neuron pathways in our brains when think about certain things. And why are you bringing up these braised sausages back, man? It look good though. Is that lentil?
Yeah,
That
that's
looks like
lentils
lentil.
with it.
Oh,
Yeah,
that looks so good. Yeah.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, I'm starting to get hungry. I think that's
Three
why.
onions in there. Ah, yeah.
Listen, man,
That's
it's about that time. We got to go get some braised sausages. Um, I think this was a great kind of pilot episode to the pursuit of anime, and um, and I hope that anyone listening, you join us for the ride because we're definitely gonna keep this train rolling.
absolutely choo choo.
Yes. Hey. So yeah, man, this was Raven, and there was Teddy. Yeah,
Yep.
and we are the pursuit of anime. We're definitely gonna be back with a new live next week, and we will catch you all on the next one. Hopefully, this was an edifying conversation that sparked some thoughts in you, and kind of inspired you to think more about this topic. And it definitely did kind of open up some new, I guess, thinking points on my end. And that was definitely a great conversation. Thank you for Teddy for having this conversation with me, and thank you to everybody who's maybe listening or watching this after
Oh,
the live.
dude. Absolutely, man. It's always a pleasure getting together with you in the lab and having those conversations because we're always going deep, which is the only option ever is going deep. If you
Yeah,
know, you know.
yeah, the only option. And these
Yeah.
sausages are going deep inside them lentils.
Hey, yo, listen, bro. We don't need to go there. We don't need to go
Hey,
there right now. This is after hours you're getting into, bro.
yeah, this is after hours. But anyways, guys, great talking, great chatting, great conversation, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace.
Peace.